Again, name is Danielle, and thank you for joining this talk today. It is called Lockdown Cooking Slump, Spice Things Up with Lively Cooking. So today I'm going to be addressing what ingredients are just great to have in the house, how to approach cooking lively and with excitement, strategies for flexibility with cooking, especially nowadays with perhaps limited ingredients, how to make cooking just as fun as going to a restaurant, and 5 of some of my favorite and best ingredients that can create multiple and delicious recipes. A little bit about myself. As I've said to people just right now, I am currently in my last year of getting my Master of Science in Human Nutrition from the University of Bridgeport. That is how Jill and I got connected because it is her alma mater. I am currently gaining clinical hours to become a CNS, a board certified nutrition specialist. And as you can tell, I currently live in Chicago. Right now, I'm back in New York at my parents' house with everything going on. And I have a dog named Pretzel because we love food here. So first, I'm going to go over some ingredients that are just great to have in the house that can be utilized in many different cooking dishes. I just want to comment here that these ingredients are household, my family where I grew up, staple ingredients are going to vary household to household based on your culture and where you grow up. So this isn't a right or wrong list to anyone, but these are just some of the ingredients that I really like to have in my house that I use frequently in cooking. So first we have the pantry items. Right now everyone kind of cleared the shelves of pantry items because they stay good for a long time. So some of my favorites are beans, some dried beans. We have lentils, we have tomato products, of course, we have like tomato paste, tomato sauce. We have grains, we have rice. I do just want to do a nice little side note for rice that some of my favorite rice options are red rice, black rice, and wild rice. Out of all the rice out there, those are some of the most nutritious options. Not to say that brown rice and white rice should not be eaten, but some of my favorites are the red rice, black rice, and wild rice. We also have, of course, like oils, extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil. We have canned pesto. Of course, sometimes I like to make my own pesto, but sometimes it's nice to just have that ready in a can to go. We have nuts, coconut milk, some Thai red curry paste. You can look at that list. It'll be included in the PowerPoints that we send at the end. Staple refrigerator items that I really like to have are, of course, your dairy and butter options. I like to have olives, capers if I'm having fish, some protein, of course, whatever you prefer, of poultry and beef and seafood, leafy greens, hummus, guacamole, garlic, shallots, and scallions are in almost all my dishes. So I have a bountiful array of those in my fridge at all times. Some of your favorite herbs, vegetables, and fruits. Any of these can also be in your frozen section as well. That's a really good way to make things last a long time. So some of the non-refrigerated fruits and vegetables that I like to have on hand are potatoes and yams. My favorites are the colorful potatoes. So the sweet potatoes, we have yellow and red and blue. Onions, those can be kept in a cool, dark place. Lemons and limes add citrus to a lot of different meals, and of course your favorite fruits and favorite fruits that do not need to be refrigerated. Last, we have spices. So there's hundreds, if not thousands, of spices out there, but these are the ones that I often see used in a lot of different recipes that you find. Our spice cabinets are going to vary household to household, but these are some of my favorites. I love having garlic powder, onion powder, rosemary, coriander, and cumin. That's some of my favorites. We of course have turmeric and cumin. So those are really nutritious too, and they flavor enhance a lot of different meals. So you don't have to have all those in your pantry, but those are just some ideas. If you're looking at your own pantry or your fridge right now and wondering, what can I integrate more into my meals? Those are some inspiration. So why we all came here is for how to keep your cooking exciting. So I feel as though the first step that most people seem as a step in the road is how to approach cooking. They don't know where to start, they don't know how to come up with an idea, or they're just overwhelmed with all the different options in their pantry or their fridge. So it's kind of the chicken or the egg situation. I like to look at it as Do you look at your ingredients that you have first, or do you think of the meal that you want first and then look at your ingredients? And when you should do both? So the answer is, it depends on your situation. So if you have an abundance of ingredients, then it should maybe be a meal concept first. But if you're running low on ingredients, of course, naturally, then you should maybe think about what ingredients that you have on hand. So if you're doing an ingredients first approach for a meal, especially right now, we might not have our favorite ingredients. I know we've been going to the grocery store and sometimes it's been completely clear of the produce section, which is awesome because that means people are eating produce, but you might not have as many options. But that does not mean that your meal has to be simple in concept. So one of my strategies for approaching a meal with the ingredients first concept is I like to look at my refrigerator and my pantry. And I point out 1 or 2 ingredients that I want to be the main star of my meal. I tend to usually choose ones that I know are not going to be fresh for very much longer, and also the ones that are delicious to me. So I usually like to choose 1 vegetable and 1 protein option, or a combination of 2 vegetable options. So the other day we had asparagus and we had spinach in the fridge. I knew those were not going to last very long in terms of freshness, so I wanted to use them and I wanted them to be yummy. So I simply just Googled asparagus and spinach recipes. Any combination that you type in, I guarantee you there will be results. And then at this point, you can take those efforts of all those bloggers and all those chefs out there and make their recipe your own. And I often just look for recipes that are simple, that don't require many ingredients, but that look delicious to me. It does not have to take a very long time. You can spend as much time as you want doing this. Sometimes it takes me 5 minutes and I'm like, yeah, that recipe looks good. Or sometimes I spend 30 minutes on it because it's kind of just fun because I'm getting more inspiration for perhaps a future meal. So at this point, you find a recipe, you really like it, and then you notice, oh my God, I don't have 3 of those ingredients that are required for the recipe. What do I do? All I'm saying is don't let that stop you. So some useful tips that I integrate in all my cooking every single day that I picked up just with how often I've cooked is that, number 1, if they request a certain vegetable that you don't have, just simply use a different vegetable, one that you don't like. Or one that you do like. Same goes for protein. So if they want chicken, but you have, say, shrimp, just swap it out. It's super easy to do, and that means that you can't eliminate that recipe. Keep going. So if you ran out of, say, onions or garlic or even ginger, I didn't put that down there. A lot of times vegetables have dried spices equivalents. So you could use onion powder or garlic powder if you have that in your spice cabinet, of course. So 1 cup of diced onions equals 2 tablespoons onion powder. I just Googled that conversion and there you go, it gave me the answer. What if you don't have some herbs that they request? Sometimes recipes call for a sprinkle of parsley or cilantro on top. If you don't have that, either just simply do not use it. You can use the recipe and not have the ingredient. Or if you have a dried spice equivalent, again, always love the spices. So not many people know this, but coriander and cilantro actually come from the same plant. So if some recipe calls for cilantro, you can use some coriander. And also, if a recipe has a whole list of spices that you do not have, you can just simply find a recipe that does use spices that you have. Or a nice thing that once you feel more comfortable with cooking is I like to kind of combine 2 different recipes. If I find a recipe that I like how they make the food and it's easy and it's simple, but I don't have those spices, but I find another recipe that has the spices that I have, I like to combine them. Just pick those spices up, put them in another recipe, and you might have actually come up with an even better combination than those 2 separately. And last but not least, if you simply just Google what to use if you don't have blank, it works like a charm every single time. So the other day I was baking and it called for buttermilk in the recipe. I did not have buttermilk. So I simply Googled what to use if you don't have buttermilk. It gave me a bunch of different options. It told me to use yogurt. It told me to have whole milk and then add some acidity to it, like lime juice or lemon juice. And it kind of gave me the same concept. I ended up using the yogurt option and the baked good was delicious. And so I didn't let that buttermilk thing stop me and I kept going. Flexibility. So what about meal first. It's all about theme. So right now, especially during this quarantine, we're not going out to restaurants as often. We're not fixing those cravings we have, like say Mexican food or Indian food, but that doesn't mean that you can't kind of have your Mexican inspired meal yourself. A lot of times when meals that I create follow a theme, it really gives it that wow factor for not only the people that I'm serving it to, but also myself of, wow, I made this. It's pretty cool. So with this presentation, I did kind of that word association game with my family of when you think of Mexican food, what ingredients do you think of? And we came up with, of course, black beans, rice, lime, cilantro. For Italian, of course, pasta, cheese, meatballs, sauce. Indian, there's so many, there's a lot of vegetables, of spinach and carrots and paneer. So the thing is, if you boil down certain cuisines, it's based on ingredients and how you make it. So it's in your possibility. If you have those ingredients, you look up a recipe, you can do it yourself. Where there's a will, there's a way. So in the last month, I've been cooking a lot more than I usually do. And it's been really fun. And it's really kind of made me reflect on how I come up with my own meals. And so sometimes I do the ingredient first approach. Sometimes I do the meal first approach. And I'm going to give you some examples. All these pictures are my own, and I hope that they kind of inspire you to have your own ideas after this presentation as well. So I love Asian food, whether it's kind of Chinese or Japanese or Thai inspired. So these are three meals that I've made myself. Some have been stir-fry dishes with vegetables and protein. I put them over rice noodles and also just rice or cauliflower rice. I was in the mood for a nice hot and sour soup, so I simply Googled a hot and sour soup recipe. I found one that took 20 minutes. It was insanely easy and delicious how good it was. And it was a recipe that asked for tofu. I did not have tofu, but I had shrimp. So there's an example of switching it out and keep going with the punches. You can make lettuce wraps. You can have Thai curry dishes with coconut milk. You can have Asian style, like a veggie and protein combo that you always think of, like a beef and broccoli. If you have beef and if you have broccoli with the right spices, you can make a delicious beef and broccoli dish yourself. For American cuisine, so really think, I have a bunch of black beans right now in our pantry, like too many to actually use, it seems like. So the other day we were looking at what we could use with all these black beans, and we came up with the idea of black bean burgers. So that was an ingredients first approach. We also had carrots. We had so many carrots. And so I remember seeing on social media one day that you could make fries with carrots. So we made carrot fries with black bean burgers. It was super good, and it was kind of like going to a nice restaurant, because it was so unusual. Also, with American cuisine, I think of potatoes. You can come up with your own home fries, mashed potatoes, baked potatoes. Potatoes are really versatile, and Americans love potatoes, so why not create your own dish? Also, I always think of Americans, we love sides. We can't get enough of sides. And so you can have a main focal point of your dish and then a super easy side as a nice little complement to the meal. Like roasted chickpeas. I love having that as a nice side. You just have a can of chickpeas. You can put salt and pepper. I personally like to add rosemary to it, but you can make your own. Stick them in an oven for 400 degrees, 15 minutes. You have roasted chickpeas as a nice, delicious side. Sauteed spinach, coleslaw. It's a really nice complement, and it's impressive for not that much effort. Indian food. So this is an example of a meal concept first that I had. I was craving Indian food, and I didn't know where to begin because there's 100 different options of Indian food. So I was looking at my ingredients and I was thinking, oh, we have butternut squash that have been sitting on my countertop for 2 weeks now. Let's see if I could utilize those. So I Googled Indian dishes with butternut squash. And lo and behold, I came up with that recipe, or I found a recipe that you see there on the side. That was a meal first concept, and I ended up making a delicious thing. The recipe called for kale. I didn't have kale. I used spinach, another leafy green, another equivalent that I found. It called for another vegetable, but it didn't have it, so I put in frozen peas instead. Kind of just making it work. Also, I love peas, so why not add what you love to it? You can utilize lentils and make your own dal dish. You can have nice vegetable main dishes like aloo gobi, which is a cauliflower and potato-based dish. You can have protein-focused Indian food like tandoori chicken or chicken tikka masala. A lot of times grocery stores have pre-made masala mixes in cans or in jars. You always have to look at the ingredients, but a lot of times I see that they're all whole foods and delicious. So sometimes I've done those. You can also do rice variations. So not just having plain old Jane white rice, but rather making it yummy cumin rice or having garlic rice really enhances a meal. Mexican. So Mexican, I always think of Mexican kind of in terms of just like 5 to 10 different ingredients that they just have made delicious in a lot of different variations. So I think of like guacamole, black beans, tomatoes, corn, and if you just a bunch of different beans, and if you mix those up in different ways, it comes up with a lot of amazing meals. So Mexican salsa, we had about like 4 avocados that were about to be ripe soon. So I was like, let's make salsa. I made that and it was delicious. We used frozen corn, we had black beans, tomatoes. The dish called for red onions. I didn't have red onions, so I didn't include red onions. Kept going. You can make wraps. You can make burritos minus the burrito. Mexican soup. That's what you see right there. It was a white bean chicken Mexican soup. Super yummy. You can also make like one pot taco bowls of Mexican food. Soups. We love, love, love soups during this quarantine. It's a really good way to integrate a lot of different vegetables that you might be having in your fridge. You can hide a bunch of vegetables also in there. You can make it taste delicious in a lot of different ways. So there's a lot of flexibility when you find a recipe for soup. If you don't have one ingredient, use another ingredient, plain and simple. You can throw in lentils, you can throw in chickpeas, you can have it tomato-based, or you could have it pureed. Whatever you like, soups can have like a whole world of possibility. Also, another thing that I've actually done with soup is that you could have 2 of the same soup bases in 2 different pots. But if you use different spices in each different soup, it's going to taste like an entirely different meal. Say in one pot you use like oregano, basil, allspice, and salt and pepper, it is going to be entirely different from the exact same soup where you use turmeric or cumin and bay leaves. So soup, it's really easy if you just adjust a couple of ingredients every time. It could be like a new meal every time. Also, you can freeze it. So it's a really good way to store it for a while and have it always on hand. So this is kind of what I call the wild card. So meals don't always have to have a theme. They don't always have to follow a cuisine, but rather you just have a bunch of different foods that you just want to pair together and voila. So here's where I really think like one pan or one pot meals shine. So simple, easy recipes that you only need to dirty one thing and then you have a delicious lunch or dinner ahead. So what you see on the left is a meal that I made, I believe 2 weeks ago. We had frozen salmon in the freezer and we had asparagus. I really like asparagus, I guess you can tell. We had asparagus in the fridge. And instead of cooking them separately in a way that I know would be good with salt and pepper and other spices, I wanted to make it easy for myself, but also new for myself. So I looked up salmon, asparagus, one pan recipes. Almost all of them required lemon. I did not have a single lemon in my house. I didn't have lemon. I didn't have lemon zest. I didn't have lemon juice. I didn't have lemon extract. So I was like, okay, what do I have? What citrus fruit could I maybe use as a replacement? And I noticed that we had one orange. So I was like, okay, let me look it up. Salmon, asparagus, orange recipe. And I found one. So it was a 1-pan recipe. I just put everything in the oven at a certain temperature. And it was a way that I had salmon and asparagus in a way that I've never had it before. And it was fun because I tried something new, but it didn't take very long. And it only dirtied 1 pan. Also, the baked potato was because my dad was craving baked potatoes, but we make it work. So the last thing that I want to point out is some of my favorite ingredients and some of the best ingredients that can work in a lot of different recipes that I love having on hand. They're resourceful and they're really useful. It took me a while to come up with the 5 ingredients because there's a lot of ingredients that we use a lot. And I didn't want to choose ones that were kind of obvious, such as chicken, where you can put that virtually in any single dish and it could be the focal point. And I also didn't want to choose an ingredient that is in almost every single recipe, say onions, which is in almost every single recipe I make. So instead, I wanted to point out 5 ingredients that you wouldn't normally think of that are nutritious and that can be the star and really make any meal. And they are eggs, they're mushrooms, they're broth, they're lentils, and it's cauliflower. So I'm going to go through each one of those and just show you different examples of how you can utilize each one of those ingredients and come up with a month's worth of meals just based on those 5. So the first one is eggs. So eggs, you normally think of breakfast time, of course. You can have some scrambled mixed in with vegetables. You can even make a crepe. You can have a frittata. Really love frittatas here. But you can also have them as a snack. So eggs, you can make egg muffins like you see on the very top right. You can have deviled eggs. Eggs are a really great tool to have. Eggs are also integrated in a lot of baked recipes, so that's why you see those muffins down there. But eggs can also be a component of, say, lunch or dinner. So I like to mix in scrambled eggs within my stir fries, as you see in the bottom left. It's a really good way to do a protein boost, makes the meal feel more fulfilling and keeps you from being hungry again in 2 hours. You can also put eggs on top of, say, like another Asian-inspired meal, like on the bottom right corner. You just put it on a meal and it adds that nice like gooey juiciness over noodles and vegetables. So if you don't have, say, chicken or beef or anything to protein to put onto a meal, you can just also add eggs, and that's a really good way to use them. Next is mushrooms. I feel as though mushrooms sometimes get a bad rep because you either love them or you really don't like them. But I think people forget that there's so many different mushrooms out there. There's cremini, there's portobello, there's white button mushrooms. So if you're not the biggest fan of mushrooms, I would highly suggest giving different types a chance because mushrooms are super nutritious and they're a really good way to integrate into different recipes. Here's some ideas. You can also have just sauteed mushrooms. It's a great side. I like to put those on top of my burgers if I have burgers sometimes, or you can integrate them into omelets, into pasta dishes. That's a zucchini noodle dish with mushrooms. On the very top left, someone made a pizza with mushrooms as kind of the base, which I'm actually curious and want to make myself. You could just have them in a roasted vegetable mix, a 1-pan roasted vegetable, put them in the oven. Soup, of course. That bottom picture of a stuffed portobello mushroom, that actually gave me inspiration for last night's dinner. We got portobello mushrooms and I've never made portobello stuffed mushrooms before, but quarantine is the time to be creative and adventurous with food. So I made a stuffed mushroom and it was super easy. It was like spinach mixed with garlic and onions and walnuts, and it was delicious. So I'm gonna do that again. You can also just put mushrooms into stir fry to bulk them up a little bit. Next we have broth. So a lot of people, I feel like they kind of forget how great broth is, and it's used in so many different recipes. I love having broth on hand. You can not only use it for soup, of course, or chili dishes, but you can see here that it's a really good way to translate dried lentils into edible, delicious lentils, or you could use it as on the middle picture, it's risotto. You could also have it for stir fry. That top right is a casserole. So it's integrated into a lot of different recipes and it wouldn't be the same without it. So I love having broth on hand, whether it's veggie, chicken, or beef. However, broth is also an interesting thing because you can make your own broth by making bone broth. So it is better to make your own. It's very easy to make, but it does take some time. But a lot of us have extra time now, so it might be a good time to try out making your own broth. It's ideal for those that are on a budget. It's really good for immunity boosting and just general health. Jill actually has a blog post about how she makes her own bone broth, which the link is right there, and we can include that in the follow-up email. This is her personal recipe. These are the ingredients that she uses, and she explains it really well in the blog post of step-by-step how to make it. I'd highly recommend checking out that blog post after this call. The fourth of my 5 favorite ingredients is lentils. So lentils is such a good way to have a good protein boost in any meal. I also think they're personally very delicious. So I like to add them into my soups. I put them as the base of a lot of my curry dishes. You can have side of lentils. That's just as delicious thing. The third one to the top to the right is just a Moroccan lentil side dish, which is delicious. On the very right, you see that lentils have been kind of made to make a lentil bolognese sauce, which I've actually tried and it's delicious. So they can be a component of like a tomato sauce dish. You can also have on the bottom left, they made a lentil sloppy joe, which I'm super interested in making. I think I see that in my near future in the next 2 weeks. You can also put lentils on top of salads, and of course you could have just lentil soup too. So lentils are really versatile and you can use them in many different ways. And last but not least is cauliflower. So I feel like people kind of only think of cauliflower, they associate it with cauliflower rice. And although I really like cauliflower rice, I think it provides a nice richness to a meal and a great boost to vegetables to any meal. It can also be used in a lot of other different ways. Cauliflower is great because when you cook it, it can still hold its structure. So it provides a good base and foundation to a meal. So for example, you see that cauliflower in 2 of these is a replacement to potatoes. So there's mashed cauliflower and also there's cauliflower home fries. I'm curious about making those as well. As you can tell, this PowerPoint inspired me while making it. Another thing that you could do for cauliflower is you can make cauliflower wings, as you see on the very bottom left. You can put it into soup to bulk up a soup. Curry dishes, just plain roasted cauliflower is delicious. And also, I really found it interesting that people use cauliflower as a way to make Alfredo sauce, making it dairy-free. So that's another way to utilize cauliflower in unique and interesting ways. So to conclude this PowerPoint, just general notes on how to keep cooking fun and interesting. I knew I threw just a lot at you, a lot of different ideas, a lot of different concepts, but if you even just walk away with one idea, I would be so happy, because what I find in cooking is that if you start just thinking even creatively in one way, it just snowballs and it keeps going whether you like it or not. So cooking, it does not have to take all day, and it does not have to be an everyday activity too. We talk a lot about meal planning in our past webinars and with Jill. Meal planning is you can make a huge meal and dish and you could freeze some of it, or you can use that as leftovers for the next day or two for your meal. It does not have to be an everyday, and there's a lot of recipes out there that don't take very long either, because people are busy, they have a family, they have work to do. So you just find ones that work for you. Another thing is that it's really fun and it can be a fun family activity, not only in terms of actually cooking itself. I find that I like to cook more by myself. There's too many cooks in the kitchen if there's more than one, but some people really like cooking with others because it's really fun. And also the fun family activity can be in the creation of the idea. So that black bean burger idea, I didn't come up with that. That was my mom. She was looking at the black beans and she was like, let's make black bean burgers. So it made her more excited about the meal. I was excited that she came up with the meal, and it makes everyone involved really excited. So you can just ask one of your family members, what ingredient do you want me to cook with tonight? Or do you want us to cook with tonight? And it gets them invested and really excited too. Cooking at home is a great opportunity to benefit you and your family's health in general. Jill and I have talked that a lot of people and a lot of her clients are actually doing really well, and their health has been improving, and it's because they're actually cooking more from home. And it's because when you cook from home, you know exactly what's going into your meal. There's no surprise of added salt or fat or sugar or how it's being cooked. Cooking is a great way to be in control of your food and what you're putting into your body. It's a good way also to keep the days fun and interesting on the day-to-day, especially now during quarantine. The days kind of just blend into one another, and Saturday feels exactly like Wednesday to me. So cooking can be exciting and it just spices things up, hence the name of this webinar. It's again, not only can make you adventurous with food, but it introduces you to think more creatively about your favorite ingredients. So say mushrooms was one of your favorite ingredients, but you almost always just put them in stir fry. But now you're like, oh yeah, I can do a lot more with mushrooms than I would have thought. And then hopefully, before you know it, the next time you go to a restaurant, you will think to yourself, I can make this. So I hope that you are going to walk away with some ideas and some inspiration from this webinar. I love cooking, and I hope that you do too. And last but not least, I just wanted to point out Jill's online course that we have right now. It's called Food Boss, and it's a really good way to boost your health. It's online and it's self-paced. So it's a really good time right now with quarantine when you have maybe an extra couple of minutes throughout the day. It helps optimize your dietary habits, your lifestyle choices, your personal goals that you want to reach. So we'll include that in also the follow-up email as well if you have more questions. So I'm going to exit the screen share right now. And I just wanted to open up the floor now to kind of just, so people can unmute themselves and they can come up, share some ideas of what they've been doing. I love getting recipes from other people. I often, if I find a recipe that I like, I often send it to my family members through email. I don't even know if they look at the email, but I hope that they like it. So yeah, Lindsay has gotten some of those emails. But so if you have any recipes that you like and you want to share, I'd be happy to hear them. Or if you have any questions, the floor is open.
So you, one thing that I was taking notes, the roasted chickpeas, how long do you leave them in the oven again?
So I usually, so it kind of depends. Sometimes it takes longer than not, but I usually put them in at 400 for about 15 minutes, and then I go in and I toss them to see if they're nice and crispy. Usually they are at that point, but sometimes I'll put them in for like another 5 minutes. And I just like to put salt, pepper, and rosemary on them, and it's delicious.
Yeah, this gave me a lot of ideas. This was really good.
Good. I'm happy that it helped.
I have a question about desserts. I have found that during quarantine, I'm much more likely to go to my dessert cabinet and dig in a little too much maybe. So do you have any suggestions for a healthier option for dessert?
Yeah, so actually, it relates back to Jill's date bar recipes. So it kind of gives me, because when you think dessert, you want that nice sweetness that you're craving, right? But I don't want a dessert that I'm going to eat a whole plate full. So it'll just naturally make me just want one or two of them. So I've been making a lot of bars that kind of have, and I think of them as my dessert. That's just what I've been doing lately. So they're like, they have dates in them or they have honey in them. So it has that little bit of sweetness. And you can make a huge batch and put them in your freezer, and then you eat like one per day. I really like dates as my kind of dessert. So that's another good thing to look up. But yeah, that helps.
Thank you.
You got it. Someone said that I'm trying cauliflower Alfredo sauce. Yeah, let me know how that goes. It sounds really delicious. And baked apples with cinnamon. Yeah, if you have a bunch of apples, that's an amazing dessert that you can make. Thank you for suggesting that. Just putting them in the oven. I know we've bought like a huge bag of apples and they were going to go bad, so we made kind of like an apple crisp. Do you make your own cauliflower rice or buy frozen? So somebody asked that. I have done both. I have bought frozen cauliflower, but most of the time I just feel it's more cost effective for me to just buy a big head of cauliflower. And I've used a cheese grater, and I just whacked out to have my own cauliflower rice in that shape. Or if I'm feeling kind of lazy, I'll kind of make it more like a polenta cauliflower, and I just put it in a food processor. It'll mix it up. It'll make it really tiny, but I've used that as a base of my meal, and it's really creamy. I just cook it at that point in a pan on the stovetop with a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of salt, and I cook it, and it cooks really fast. And then you have your base. What device do you use to make zucchini noodles? So I don't have one of those spiral noodle tools that you would need to make the zucchini noodles. So if I'm having zucchini noodles, I have to buy them in that shape, but you can get that tool that spirals it. And my sister has one. So someone has a little handheld tool. Yeah. So it's kind of, you need the tool to do it, but if you have it, that's a really great thing to have. I love all these questions. They even sell them in pharmacies too. Good to know. It's called Zoodler. It's a cute name. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for that. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions or ideas?
I just could make a comment about doing Food Boss during quarantine. It's actually working out really well. I had been a little concerned about starting the program, during quarantine, because I thought I'd have like a list of 100 ingredients that I wouldn't have, but that's really not what it's about. Jill goes through, understanding, your habits and your goals, and just it's more on and your mindset, and it's not like, like I've been on Weight Watchers before, where they don't tell you the whys, they just give you a list of foods. And this is more, I'm trying to understand who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. So it's actually working out really well during this time frame. Just saying.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jill. I think you have created a great program.
Thank you, Marlene. I would love to hear more ideas too. Like, I bet you just look at the brain trust we have here of people who've been cooking for a while. Like,
Yeah.
have anything you love to cook? Please share.
It could even be super simple. Go-to meal. Oh,
Well, your program made me really hungry.
if I think you're on mute if you're trying to say.
Oh, I'm off mute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. If we don't have dates and we want you to use a date in the recipe, I mean, not the date nut bars, but like in the banana bread or anything that calls for date, what else could you substitute?
So
Raisins.
yeah,
I've done that.
raisins. That's a great idea, because it's kind of all in the same ballpark of getting that little bit of sweetness and tanginess within a dessert.
Okay.
Raisins is a great idea.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
I've used figs, but they're probably less easy to obtain now than dates. So I don't know if that helps. Dried figs.
Yeah.
I've
also had here, whoever was just speaking can go.
I just wanted to share. First of all, I'm lucky I have a boatload of dates, because just before the lockdown, my husband and I had just returned from Morocco, and we stashed tons of really high quality dates in our luggage, but they're really addictive. It's hard to just kind of refrain, and because they have a high sugar content, as healthy as they are. But I also just wanted to share that this past year I joined a home delivery service of organic produce called Misfits Market. You might have heard of it. And we've been getting it, and you cannot curate your box. So every week I get a box of fruits and vegetables, and it's forcing me to find ideas and ways to use produce that I would not ordinarily pick up, perhaps.
Awesome.
And it was very affirming what you've been speaking about, because I have been looking online for recipes and using what I have. But what you've now given me the courage to do is to make substitutions. Because if I found a recipe that called for things and I didn't have every single ingredient, I would just, it was painstaking and time consuming to try to find a recipe for which I had every single ingredient at home. For instance, last night I had a butternut squash, and I found a recipe online that was incredibly simple. I'm not a cook, so this might be incredibly elementary to most of you. It was cubing it up and mixing it with some olive oil, a little bit of maple syrup, some salt and some cinnamon, and then baking it in the oven. It was unbelievably good. And I make butternut squash in other ways, but I was just getting sick of repeating the same recipe.
Yeah.
So just
That's
Googling
awesome.
it was incredibly simple.
Yeah, because there's just so many. It's incredible to actually just look up any recipe concept or a butternut squash recipe. There'll be thousands. So I'm happy that you found one that you're looking forward to. And I used to have the same trouble of, I'd look at a recipe when I wasn't as comfortable with cooking, and I think, oh, I don't have all this, because you want to follow it exactly, right? But yeah, I'm happy that this gave you the courage that you don't have to.
It did.
Either you don't have to include the ingredient at all, or you can just make a nice, easy replacement based on what you like.
Right.
Awesome.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I want to try that butternut squash. It sounds good.
Right. And for anyone who's really interested in not going to the store, but getting organic produce delivered to you, the service is called Misfits Market. It's fantastic. You cannot curate it. It's whatever they send you every week, but they have 2 size boxes, the Little Mischief, which is good for 1 to 2 people, and the Madness, which is good for a family of 5. And by the way, it's all organic, 100% organic, the majority of which is locally sourced.
Yeah, I imagine it's more seasonal too, right? At that point then?
And not completely though, because what they do is they get things that might otherwise be discarded even by health food stores or grocers that have lost the visual appeal of perfection. That's why it's called Misfits.
Yeah.
It's slightly less than perfect. So they might get stuff that was not locally sourced. Like I got avocados, and I got some, I forget, was it a pineapple or no, mangoes. And they're clearly not local, but it was from a local distributor that could otherwise not sell them.
Always fresh, sometimes normal. I just see Jill put that.
Right.
That's their logo.
Quoting their little, but their mission statement is to, their mission statement is to reduce waste, food waste.
Yeah.
So they're trying to find organic produce that is perfectly usable, but maybe not perfectly saleable. And but everything that I've gotten, and we've been subscribers now for almost a year, I've never found anything in there that I perhaps wouldn't otherwise have picked up at the health food store. It never struck me as being
interesting,
that far from perfect.
Yeah. Well, thank you for offering that. That's a really good, because I hate wasting myself too. That's another reason why I try to be creative with my cooking, of looking at my fridge and like, okay, how can I use this ingredient before it is going to go, not to be useless. So,
right.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Does anyone else have any other recipes or different strategies they've been using?
Don't be shy, come on. We can all benefit from what we're doing, you know?
I'd like to benefit from what I'm doing, but I never can remember what I did. Because I throw everything together, and my husband's like, oh, that was so good. And I don't,
Yeah, that's awesome.
But we had a lot of good meals lately because I have time, and I'm just, kind of doing what you're talking about, using what I have but I get a little bored sometimes. So it's really nice having some new ideas. You know, I get bored of what I'm buying and making.
Something that would kind of is like follows the misfit thing of getting different vegetables every day or every week, whatever it may be, to keep things lively for me when I'm grocery shopping, normally not in a quarantine state, is I like to go into a grocery store and I think of I look around and I think of one produce that I haven't had in a really long time, or that I can't even remember having the last time. And I only get one of those in addition to all my staple produce that I like to get. And I somehow find a way to integrate that into my cooking to keep it just like lively, but doable at the same time. One of those, I think like before this was, I didn't cook with it, but I got like dragon fruit because I was like, I haven't had dragon fruit in years. So I got that, you know, just to mix things up, and it keeps things entertaining and not just the same meal over and over. But Eileen, your meals sound delicious apparently, so keep it up.
And that's also what you're doing, also introduces different nutrients as well, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
We do have the luxury of so much diversity. We might as well take advantage of it from a nutritional perspective.
Yeah, well said. You know, different combinations of things are always good. Variety, keeping it fresh.
Yeah, this was great. I got so much inspiration. I have like a list of things I want to make.
Awesome. Yeah, I wasn't kidding when I said that making this presentation inspired me to do the stuffed portobello mushrooms. Like, I wouldn't have thought of that otherwise. And then I was like, yeah, let me do it. And it ended up being really good. So it's another thing in my wheelhouse now.
Yeah. We should like try to, I don't know, I'm just thinking, well, I wish there was a way that we could inspire each other on an ongoing basis. Like once a week, be like, I made this, you know, like share our recipes with each other, because even if it's just the name of the recipe, it doesn't have to be the whole recipe, but like, I'm making this so that, because there's stuff like I don't think there was anything on there that I haven't thought about cooking or in some form or another, but I just completely forget. And I'm like, I got nothing. And then I just revert back to the same old thing that I'm always like. Today, Mike is going shopping. I put down my list, but it was like literally the taco meat with the, you know, like the taco meat with vegetables and guacamole and salsa, that thing.
Yeah.
I've made that 1,000 times in my life, I think, in a day. But I just couldn't think of anything else. So that went on the list. So maybe I should message him and change it.
Well, he's still there. Yeah, I would love to get that. I love hearing what people are cooking all the time. My sister, she's like, I cook a lot, but I don't consider myself like a chef. Like, I consider her a chef. She's one of those people that she doesn't need Google as her aid. She can just look at a bunch of different recipe or ingredients and make something delicious. So she always sometimes sends me things that she's been doing, and I'm like, oh my God, yay, like inspiration. So yeah, we should, like, on the Facebook group or in some way, just share some recipes that we've been doing.
Yeah, we should start doing that on the Facebook group. If you're not on the Facebook group, just message me and I can add you to it. Or Bodywise Food Smart. I don't know, that's the name of it. Bodywise Food Smart group.
So yeah, it's about lunchtime. So I don't know if you have the mental power to do something even for lunch right now, but perhaps even dinner, you know, spicing things up a little bit. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining, everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody. Really, it was good.
Does anyone have any last dire questions or comments before we head off for the day?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I did something the other day. I had some organic grapes that were really going bad, and I threw them in and I broiled them for a few minutes. And I was making supper using the broiler, in the oven also. And I broiled them and I threw in some, I think orange pieces with the grapes, and I used it as a side dish.
Wow. That sounds good.
It was very good. It was really good.
Did you just come up with it yourself?
Yeah, I threw on, I think, I don't know if I threw on rosemary or maybe oregano. I don't know what I was throwing on. I just was having a good time. I've been very into lately. I know rosemary, basil, and oregano, just really into it. And I heard from somebody that oregano is supposed to be very good for the virus, that and ginger. And so I just threw that in.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And also, Jill, can you hear me?
Yep.
I make the bone broth. I haven't made it in a while, which reminds me I'm going to do it. But I also do it in the slow cooker for 24 hours. Is that how you make yours?
I do it on the stovetop, but the slow cooker is great because you don't have to worry about
Yeah, that's
gas
what I
going off or anything like that. So yeah, definitely.
yes, I do that, and I make it, and then I put it afterwards into mason jars, and I can have it.
Yes.
Yeah. It's great just by itself to just
Yeah.
sip on.
Yeah, and not talk about being good for nutrition and your immune function. Bone broth is really good for that.
And I don't know. Sorry, I don't know if anyone knows of it, but there was a recipe that was being passed around. I don't have it in front of me. It's a whole tea. It's a different things to put into a tea to make for, like, they said it would help the immune system during this quarantine time. And it calls for ginger and turmeric and I think it's lemons and limes, and you cook it all together. I mean, it takes time. My daughter will send some over, and it's kind of powerful. But also, I've also heard that horseradish is supposed to be very healthy at this point. So we've been upping our horseradish intake.
Yeah, I actually did a call this morning where I did a presentation on cert foods, like, you know, those high polyphenol rich foods. And while I was talking, I said something like, I'd never said it before, but I realized it's like when something's bitter or spicy or pungent, or, you know, that burning you get from horseradish or wasabi, that's polyphenols. And that, even though that stuff is sometimes uncomfortable for us, I think that the more, like, you know, I mean, that's basically poison. It's the plant's natural defense mechanism, right? So those poisons actually are really good for us. They stimulate our immune system. So, so I think that's why a lot of those foods like ginger and horseradish and garlic and red chili peppers, they're, you know, they're intense, but they have all these wonderful benefits for us. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to say is, you know, using, like Miriam, you were talking about rosemary and, you know, these herbs and just really getting into them. And I mean, I believe that the true path to health over time is to just be using these things all the time. Herbs and spices and ginger and garlic and scallions and mushrooms and, you know, all of these wonderful little whole foods that actually make our food taste good also are little by little by little by little actually improving our health. It's not about like the Western model of like, okay, just take this medication or this vaccine and it's going to save you. It's actually like, no, it's a lifetime of using whole foods and spices and herbs and sleeping at night and taking walks. And it's a lifetime. It's the cumulative effect of all of that that's really going to protect us from illness. But okay, I'll get off my soapbox now.
That's awesome.
No, but
yeah, it's inspirational.
It's really true though. Like I said, you know, horseradish and ginger, we all think of it, but they're all saying that this is very helpful for us right now. So I'm sure if you all Google these different teas that everyone is advertising to take, I mean, they're burny. They're very burny, and that's what we need right now.
Yeah, burny. I like that.
Burning tea.
It is. It's just going to help with the virus. I mean, I don't know how long we could all stay in quarantine. I'm a teacher trying to teach a little bit, saying to the kids, well, my second graders are totally, they have packets. But right now it's just like, I don't know if I'm going to see them the rest of the year.
Yeah. Eventually we're going to have to go out and intermingle with each other. And the question is, you know, how strong are you going to be when that happens? That's my take on it right now. And this is our opportunity to take care of our bodies. Let's take advantage of this time, really.
Yeah.
So I loved Danielle, with her idea, and, you know, creating this webinar. I thought was fabulous. Really good job.
Happy that I could help. So yeah, let's get cooking
Yeah.
or making burning tea, whatever you want.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a
Bye.
great rest of your day.
You.
Bye.
I-
Bye.